Well, today, we're diving right into the hottest topic in tech, artificial intelligence.
And honestly, it's evolving so fast, it's hard to even keep up with it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right.
Which is why we're turning to Gary Rivlin's new book, AI Valley, Microsoft, Google, and the trillion-dollar race to cash in on artificial intelligence.
Oh, Rivlin's a great choice.
Right. I mean, a Pulitzer Prize winner. He actually spent a full year in Silicon Valley with incredible access, right, to all the major players. And it literally just came out this month, March 2025. It's our guide to really understanding AI right now, where it is, who's driving it.
So what are we focusing on? What are the big takeaways we want to share with everyone today?
I think the main thing is what Rivlin lays out so well is how this whole era of AI that we've been hearing about forever, like it's finally here.
Yeah, for decades, it was like this futuristic fantasy almost.
Right. And now, suddenly, we have things like ChatGPT, Gemini. These tools are becoming like everyday words.
That's wild.
And the question Rivlin asks is this it? Is this the real turning point for AI?
I mean, it certainly feels that way.
It does.
Yeah.
And Rivlin really puts you right in the middle of it all. Silicon Valley. He spent a year there, remember, with the founders, the venture capitalists, all these people who are racing to cash in on this AI boom.
It's like this incredible concentration of ambition and money.
Yeah.
And Rivlin really captures that energy.
Yeah, he does. And one of the things that makes his perspective so valuable is the level of access he got, especially through this guy, Reid Hoffman.
Oh, the LinkedIn founder.
Exactly. And Rivlin portrays him as this kind of central figure, this connector, introducing him to all these cutting-edge companies.
Makes sense with Hoffman's network.
Right. And that gives Rivlin this front row seat to places like Inflection AI, which Hoffman co-founded in 2022. But then we also get an inside look at OpenAI.
The San Francisco company behind ChatGPT.
Yep. The one that really kicked off this whole AI frenzy.
Oh, and Rivlin introduces us to the key people too, right? Like Sam Altman.
Yes. Big force at OpenAI.
Yeah. And then there's Mustafa Suleyman, the co-founder of DeepMind.
Now, DeepMind's interesting because they had some of those early big wins in AI. Like, they cracked the game of Go years before anyone thought it was possible.
Yeah, that was huge. And then Google snapped them up back in 2014.
Right. So Suleyman's story is a really interesting way to see how the whole field has evolved.
And it's not just the startups, is it? Rivlin also goes behind the scenes at the big guys.
Oh, yeah. Microsoft, Meta, Google, all battling it out to stay ahead in AI.
And Rivlin shows us their different approaches, the sheer scale of their investments. It's mind-boggling.
It is. And that brings up this sense of uncertainty that Rivlin keeps coming back to. Because even with all this money, all these brilliant people, nobody really knows who's going to win this AI race.
Right. There's this huge potential for success, but also the risk of massive failure. It's really high stakes.
And when Rivlin brings in these familiar names like Musk, Zuckerberg, Gates, it really hits home how big this all is. Like, the implications go way beyond just the tech world.
Absolutely. And what I found really fascinating is that Rivlin's book isn't just looking back. It's like he's capturing these AI breakthroughs as they happen.
Oh, yeah. You get this feeling you're right there as these new capabilities are being developed. Like, you're getting a sneak peek into the future.
It's really exciting. But Rivlin makes it clear that the technology is only part of the story.
Right. There's this human side to it.
Yeah, the ambition, the rivalries, the personalities of all these people involved. Rivlin really brings that drama to life. It makes you see that it's not just about the algorithms.
Absolutely. So the bottom line from Rivlin's AI Valley is this. We are in this crazy period of AI innovation and intense competition like we've never seen before. The stakes are incredibly high. The tech giants are all in. And there are these key figures driving it all.
It's a fascinating story. And I'm curious, for everyone listening, what stands out to you the most from what we've discussed today? Is it the tech itself, the business side of things, or maybe these really compelling personalities who are shaping the future? It's something to think about as this all plays out.
Yeah.
What's so fascinating to me is the story of Reid Hoffman,
Oh, absolutely.
and how that's all intertwined with the emergence of Inflection AI.
Right.
It feels like such a pivotal moment, and the sources you've given us give us so much to talk about.
Yeah, and it's more than just like a technological shift.
Right.
It's like a whole reshaping of the landscape of tech itself. This resurgence of AI is being driven by some seriously impressive advancements.
Yeah.
Figures like Hoffman, but also the giants,
Yeah.
Google and Microsoft and OpenAI.
Oh, yeah.
They're all major players in this like drama that's unfolding.
Right.
And you can really feel a sense of excitement, but also some tension.
Yeah. Definitely. So, okay, for us, you and me talking about this, AI feels like it's suddenly everywhere, right? But what your sources remind us is that this is not some like overnight thing,
Yeah.
The term artificial intelligence goes all the way back to the 1950s.
Oh, yeah.
And there was this huge wave of optimism then. It's funny, actually, one of the pieces you sent me mentions Hoffman looking back at that early period, and he called it juvenile.
That's right.
Which I thought was interesting.
Well, and there were all these like predictions being thrown around back then that now looking back seem almost kind of silly, like the idea that machines would be, dominating chess within a decade.
Right.
In reality, it took over 3.5 decades for a computer to even beat checkers.
Wow.
And even longer for chess.
Yeah.
So that really goes to show you how this field has always had these cycles, of like huge enthusiasm, but then reality sort of catches up.
Yeah. Expectations versus reality, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about that in relation to all the excitement we're seeing now.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just games, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you had pioneers like Alan Turing
Yeah.
with his famous imitation game, which we now all call the Turing test.
Right, right.
And that was all about defining machine intelligence through conversation.
Mm-hmm.
He actually predicted that a computer would be indistinguishable from a human in conversation
Wow.
by the year 2000.
Interesting.
That mark was missed by over 2 decades.
Wow.
So, it makes you think about how far we've come,
Yeah.
but also that long history of promise and then...
And the uneven delivery, yeah.
Right, exactly.
But what I find really interesting about those early days is,
Yeah.
people were trying to figure out how to build machines that could think like us.
Mm-hmm.
Like Frank Rosenblatt's
Oh, yeah.
Perceptron,
Right.
which was an early attempt to model the human brain.
With artificial neurons.
Right, artificial neurons. And that generated so much buzz.
Yeah.
But I think his biggest contribution
Yeah.
was the concept of machine learning,
Okay.
which is the idea that computers could actually learn from data.
So instead of like coding every single rule...
Right,
The
exactly.
computer learns from experience, basically.
Exactly, through trial and error with all that data.
That's a pretty fundamental shift, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
In how we think about AI.
Right. And Rosenblatt was essentially laying the groundwork
Yeah.
for these systems that can evolve and, become more sophisticated over time.
Right.
But the thing is, even with that early innovation, the field went through what we call these AI winters
Oh, yeah.
in the late 80s and 90s,
Right.
and funding just dried up.
Interesting.
There's a lot of skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the sources you sent even talks about how James Manica
Right.
was actually advised not to use artificial intelligence in his thesis during that period.
Really?
Because the term just wasn't taken seriously.
Wow. So the term was actually like
It was tainted
tainted, yeah.
because the symbolic AI approaches that were popular back then just didn't really deliver.
It's so wild to hear that now.
I know.
Given how much interest there is in AI, it really makes you appreciate just how much things have changed.
Uh-huh.
And this really sets the stage for Reid Hoffman's journey, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And how he ended up co-founding Inflection AI.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wasn't always a believer in AI, was he?
Not at first. No.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, when you look at the material you've gathered, it highlights this early fascination he had with science fiction.
Right.
Role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons
Oh, wow.
and RuneQuest.
RuneQuest, okay.
And there's this sense that he really wanted to belong,
Oh, okay.
which seems like it was a big motivator for him.
Interesting.
And he even chose this kind of unconventional boarding school, the Putney School.
Mm-hmm.
And you can already see those early signs of his entrepreneurial spirit there,
And then he goes to Stanford, right?
right into the heart of what was becoming Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
But even there, he wasn't really captivated by AI.
Interesting.
He saw it as something that was still in its infancy. He even said, and this is from one of the articles you sent,
Yeah.
that AI was not going to happen anytime soon.
Wow.
And this was during his time at Stanford.
It's fascinating how someone who's so embedded in the tech world
Right.
could hold that view.
Yeah, well, he had a front row seat to all this early AI research,
Right.
but he just wasn't convinced about its practical potential.
Mm-hmm.
So this actually leads him to pursue philosophy at Oxford
Okay.
because he's grappling with these big societal questions.
Right.
But then he realizes that the academic path
Yeah.
is maybe a little too abstract for him,
Too theoretical.
right? Too theoretical.
Yeah.
He wanted to make a more practical impact.
So he comes back and he ends up at Apple, right?
Right.
Working on eWorld.
Yeah.
And then he co-founds SocialNet.
Exactly.
which was focused on social networking.
That's right. And it's amazing to see how early he recognized
Yeah,
the power of connecting people online,
right.
even before the internet was what it is today.
So what happened with SocialNet?
Well, what's really insightful is the lessons he learned from it,
Okay.
like the importance of having real identities online
Right.
and how fast you have to learn in a startup.
Yeah.
And they made some early mistakes, you know,
Like, well, what?
like allowing people to use fake names,
Right.
which really diluted the value of those real connections.
Interesting.
But it gave him this foundational understanding that
Yeah.
he took into his future successes.
And then, of course,
And then LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, arguably his most well-known venture.
He self-funded it in the beginning, right?
He did in those early months, which gave him a lot of control.
Right.
And he was very strategic about when he decided to seek venture capital.
Okay.
Because the buzz around Friendster at the time
Yeah.
really helped to validate the whole idea of social networking.
For investors.
For investors, exactly.
So his timing was perfect.
It really was impeccable.
And LinkedIn became hugely successful.
It did, but his story doesn't end there.
No.
You know, your sources detail his incredibly successful career as an angel investor.
Oh, right. With like Ironport.
Right, Ironport, NanoSolar, Clicker,
Yeah.
Zynga, Groupon.
Groupon. Yeah, wow.
He became known for having this golden touch.
Right. He could just spot the winners.
He seemed to have this knack for identifying promising companies and founders early on.
So with all that success, what brings him back to AI?
Right.
I mean, how does inflection happen?
Well, it seems like a conversation with Elon Musk was a big turning point.
Okay.
Musk had just been to a conference about, you know, the rapid progress being made in AI and the potential risks.
Right.
And this led to the formation of the Future of Life Institute.
Okay.
And Musk was talking about these huge investments in AI
Yeah.
from companies like Google and Facebook and Microsoft and Baidu.
Right.
And this seems to have really sparked Hoffman's interest again.
So it made him rethink his earlier skepticism about the field.
Exactly.
Okay, so what was the main idea behind inflection?
Well, the core concept was to create machines that can understand human language naturally. So you wouldn't need to learn complicated commands or anything.
Right. So making AI more accessible to everyone.
Precisely, more intuitive for everyone.
And his co-founder, Mustafa Suleyman,
Right.
he had this vision of an engaging conversationalist, which is interesting, an AI that could offer empathy.
Right. Almost like a life coach or therapist.
A therapist, okay.
Yeah, that could give you advice and really understand you.
Which is very different from like the chatbots of the past, right?
Totally. Those are much more limited and task-oriented.
And this brings us to what everyone's talking about now,
Yeah.
generative AI,
Right.
which is AI that can actually create new content.
Right. From text and images to even video.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. And some of the sources you gave me even compare it to the invention of electricity or fire,
Wow.
highlighting just how transformative it could be.
It does feel pretty monumental.
It does. But of course, with such power comes a lot of questions and some unease.
Well, yeah, like what does AI empathy even really mean?
Exactly.
And there's the risk of these unexpected errors and things.
Right. And the models are improving so quickly
Yeah.
that it makes people wonder if we'll be able to control them.
Right, and what the unintended consequences might be.
Exactly. And that's where Hoffman and Suleiman's third way
Okay.
comes in.
Okay.
They're trying to find a middle ground between
Right.
what some people call the doomers, who are worried about AI being an existential threat,
Right.
and the accelerationists, who basically say we should develop AI as fast as possible.
No matter what.
Right. They're advocating for a more responsible approach
Right.
to make sure we use AI for good.
Like Stephen Hawking said, right?
Exactly. He said AI could be the best or worst thing for humanity.
So how is this new AI landscape impacting startups in Silicon Valley?
Well, the costs associated with developing AI are so high.
Yeah.
You need so much computing power. And
the competition for talent is fierce.
it is. So that could give an advantage to the big tech companies.
Right.
And there's a lot of anxiety among founders
Yeah.
about whether companies like Google and Microsoft will just dominate the whole AI era.
And potentially stifle innovation.
Exactly.
But Inflection AI still managed to raise a ton of money as a startup.
They did.
I mean, Hoffman's involvement must have helped a lot.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about Greylock writing their biggest check ever,
Right.
plus Hoffman's own personal investment.
And backing from people like Bill Gates and Eric Schmidt.
Right.
And Suleiman was able to attract amazing talent.
Yeah.
People from DeepMind and Google and OpenAI.
So he built a real dream team.
He did, and they raised $1.3 billion in just 15 months.
Wow.
And they weren't even generating revenue yet.
That's incredible.
Investors were clearly betting big on their vision.
For this new kind of conversational AI.
Exactly.
So let's talk a bit more about DeepMind,
Okay.
because Mustafa Suleyman's background there is really interesting.
It is.
And it shows just how competitive these tech giants are. So tell me about Suleyman's story.
Well, even from a young age, he showed that he was an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And when Google acquired DeepMind,
Great.
that was a huge deal.
Yeah.
It immediately made them a leader in the AI race.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing internally, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, Google already had Google Brain,
Right.
which was another AI research center.
So there was some internal rivalry.
There was.
Yeah.
And when the DeepMind acquisition happened,
Yeah.
some of the Google researchers were surprised.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And there were even some lingering resentments.
So bringing DeepMind into Google's structure wasn't easy.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Integrating that kind of independent and innovative culture into a big company like Google
Right.
presented some real challenges.
And Google has had its own ethical issues with AI, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like disbanding their ethics board
Right.
and the controversy around Project Maven.
Mm-hmm.
They have their AI principles, but putting them into practice hasn't always been straightforward.
No, it hasn't.
It's interesting to contrast that with Microsoft's approach.
Yeah,
I mean, they've really made a comeback in AI.
they have. And a lot of that is thanks to Satya Nadella.
Right.
He's really focused on cloud computing and artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And he even reached out to Reid Hoffman.
Right, which led to Microsoft acquiring LinkedIn.
Exactly. And that really strengthened Microsoft's position in the tech world.
And Hoffman's insights probably still influence Microsoft's AI strategy.
I'm sure they do.
And then we have the arrival of ChatGPT,
Right.
which really felt like a game changer.
It did.
It brought AI into the mainstream conversation,
Uh-huh.
and it started what people are calling an AI arms race.
Yes, for talent and market share.
But your sources point out that this competition has been going on for a while.
Oh, yeah. It's been simmering for almost a decade.
It's just become much more public now.
Exactly.
And the reactions from the AI community have been interesting.
They have.
Like Jan LeCun at Meta,
Right.
he said that ChatGPT wasn't actually that groundbreaking
Hmm.
because Meta had developed similar technologies.
Yeah, things like BlenderBot 3 and Galactica.
Right.
But they faced their own challenges.
Yeah. Like what?
Well, they had problems with public perception
Okay.
and also with their strategy for rolling them out.
So they didn't really gain much traction.
No. Or they were shut down too early.
And then Microsoft jumps in with Sydney,
Right.
which was later renamed Copilot,
Right, right.
and they integrated it into Bing.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it could access the internet in real time
Yeah.
and provide citations.
That really set it apart from ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And it got a lot of positive attention.
But there were some concerns too, right?
There were,
Some of the interactions.
yeah, like Kevin Roos's experience,
Right.
which raised questions about whether AI could be manipulative or unpredictable.
And Hoffman's reaction to that was interesting.
Yeah.
He seemed to downplay those concerns, saying that unusual outputs were just the result of unusual inputs. Right?
But Google's response with Bard wasn't as smooth, was it?
No, it wasn't.
It felt rushed,
Yeah.
and it didn't really perform as well as ChatGPT initially.
It shows how much pressure these companies are under
Oh, yeah.
to compete
Absolutely.
and to get these technologies out quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this has really made San Francisco the new center for AI.
Right.
They're calling it Cerebral Valley.
Cerebral Valley. I like that.
Yeah, and you've got all these new startups like OpenAI and Anthropic
Right.
and all these AI meetups and hacker houses
The whole new scene.
and so much venture capital pouring into the AI space,
Oh, yeah.
even for companies that aren't making money yet.
Like Mistral AI,
Right.
which got a ton of funding.
Yeah, so some people are wondering if this is another .ai bubble.
Right, like the .com bubble.
Exactly.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It will, and it brings us back to Inflection AI and their vision for Pi. They were really focused on EQ, right?
Yes, emotional intelligence.
For their chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
And they also wanted to achieve IQ.
Right, cognitive abilities.
They make Q.
Action quotient, which means being able to take action in the real world.
Okay.
It's ambitious.
It is. And what's really fascinating is
Yeah.
how they trained Pi's personality through reinforcement learning with human feedback.
Right, so they're trying to create a chatbot
Mm-hmm.
that's kind and supportive.
Right.
and discouraging negative traits.
So they're really thinking about the ethics of it all.
They are, and it's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
To get that balance right.
Between being playful and being helpful.
Exactly.
It's interesting to think about the potential these chatbots have
Yeah.
for addressing loneliness.
Right.
Especially with the U.S. Surgeon General talking about the dangers of social isolation. And we're even seeing these AI therapy startups popping up.
It's a whole new area.
It is, but Inflection AI face some big challenges.
Yeah.
I mean, the cost of competing with these tech giants is enormous.
It is. They're investing billions in AI infrastructure.
And then they offer their AI products for free.
Right. So it's really hard for a startup to make money.
So that's what led to Microsoft acquiring Inflection's team and technology.
It seems like it.
And Suleiman himself said that this was the best way to achieve their vision.
Their My AI vision.
Right. It gave them access to Microsoft's users and resources.
And their massive computing power.
But it wasn't a traditional acquisition, right?
No, it was more like they hired the Inflection team
Okay.
and licensed their AI models.
Which has made some people wonder if it was a way to avoid regulatory scrutiny.
Right.
This whole story is so fascinating.
It is.
It really shows how quickly AI is evolving and how competitive it is.
And how much we still have to figure out about its impact on society.
Right. So let's wrap up this deep dive into AI,
Okay.
focusing on Reid Hoffman and Inflection AI.
Right.
What are the key takeaways here?
Well, I think we see these recurring cycles of enthusiasm and progress in AI.
Right.
And we see how individuals like Hoffman can really shape the field. And we see this intense competition driving innovation,
Right.
but also this constant need to consider the broader societal implications.
Okay, so to our listeners out there,
Yeah.
given how fast AI is changing,
Right.
what do you see as the biggest opportunity or the most pressing challenge?
Yeah.
And what questions does this raise for you?
About the role of technology in our lives.
We encourage you to keep exploring these developments
Absolutely.
and to think critically about the world we're building.
It's an exciting time.
It really is.